Hello and welcome to Mothman Ministries. I am Reverend Pop Pop, your preacher from the Black Lagoon, and we are going to be talking about 1 Samuel 8. In 1 Samuel 8, the Israelites asked the prophet Samuel to appoint a king over them. Before this moment, the Israelites had lived in a sort of council-based theocracy, with multiple judges appointed to lead the people, but no central power other than God. Samuel, very confused by this demand, asked the people why they would possibly want such a thing. After all, they had God as their central power. Why would they want anything else? The Israelites responded that they wanted a king because, well, everyone else had one. All the other nations had big, strong, glorious men adorned in fine fabrics to judge them and lead them into battle. They, too, wanted the opportunity to be admired by the world, to have a great nation, the envy of all other nations, a shining beacon on earth. Samuel, in return, told them that a king was probably not a good idea, as kings can often be ruthless, oppressive, and cruel. That a king would take their daughters and the fruits of their labors, that he would make them all into slaves, and they would be trapped in the same kind of bondage that they were when they were slaves in Egypt. But the Israelites didn't care. They wanted their king. They wanted their big, strong ruler. They wanted to make the nation of Israel great. So Samuel went to God about the whole matter, and God said, "If this is what the people want, then you have no choice. Give them the king they are asking for." And so a man named Saul was appointed king, beginning a 400-year reign of men who eventually succumbed to wickedness, adultery, and idolatry. Sometimes, when I'm reading my Bible, I get a little bit depressed, because the story of Saul was written and recorded thousands of years ago. We have had story after story, both biblical and non-biblical, about the corruptive influence of power. And yet, many of us still crave it. We either wish to rule the world or to be ruled over. We want to be part of something big and grand. It seems our fellow Americans, despite so many of the calls that this is a Christian nation, need to read their Bible a little bit better. Because it appears that many of us, especially those of us who claim to be the most devout, still want a big, strong man to lead us into glory, to make America great again. We see this not only here, but all over the world. We look at nations like Russia, Hungary, and modern-day Israel, as well as so many others. They too have succumbed to authoritarian strongmen. Men who promise to keep out their enemies, to lead them into glorious battle, to make them the envy of all surrounding nations, and to expand their empires. These men fan the flames of racism, homophobia, and misogyny. They make people afraid, so that the people think they need someone strong to protect them. And the results have been disastrous. These countries are plagued by human rights violations, war, poverty, and racial tensions. And while most countries have these to some degree, the strongman leader has to keep his people in a constant state of fear. His power relies on it. So he always needs a new enemy to fight, a new group of people to demonize. If things start going poorly under his leadership, he blames it on immigrants, outsiders, or an elusive enemy from within. Often people of a different race, religion, or political ideology. The battle must be constant, so he can convince people that the only one who can stop this threat is him. We see billionaires and business moguls toting the values of eugenics, monarchy, and dictatorship in public forums, citing the works of a handful of whack-job philosophers, lending credence to the strongman's political ideology. And people trust them, because they have fancy degrees from Ivy League universities and have paid a lot of people a great deal of money to convince the world that they are the biggest, smartest boys in the room. This is a pattern that has persisted for millennia. Authoritarians are, and always have been, weird. They're weird little guys that surround themselves with a bunch of weird little yes men. And even if they didn't start weird, the power and money make them weird. We learn this from Saul, from David, from Solomon. There is a quote from Lord Acton that most of us have heard. Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. So, what makes a good leader? Well, we were already given an example in the figure of Jesus Christ. And what makes Jesus so fascinating is that he is an inversion of the strong man. He was a poor man from a bad neighborhood born to a teenage mother. He was gentle. He healed people. He fed people. He dined with the poor and the oppressed. He sat with those who society looked down upon and listened to their struggles. He was a pacifist. And this is how Jesus is described in every book of the Bible except for Revelation, whose theology, in my opinion, is shoddy at best and downright heretical at worst. He preached love and kindness, and he was killed for it, as so many people who preach love and kindness are. Love and kindness are often frightening viewpoints to hold. They're vulnerable. They're brave emotions, to the point of recklessness. Jesus teaches us that leadership and strength do not come from cruelty and violence, as those are emotions born from fear. Jesus teaches us that leadership and strength are born from a courageous, reckless love that is brave enough to be vulnerable. Progress is rarely made without that love. To love your neighbor is to stand in solidarity with them. To love them so much that you demand justice for them. Leadership must be built around this love of your neighbor, love of your community, love of your country, and the desire to make that country a better place for all your countrymen. If not, your leadership will be based around fear. It will require a strong man who will crush your supposed enemies. But a strong man dictator knows no difference between an enemy and a neighbor. They crush at their own will. And when they have destroyed one group of people, they will move on to the next. Fascism, authoritarianism, these are beasts that eat. They eat and they eat until there is nothing left, because the war can never be over for the strong man dictator. And because he has been systematically destroying people, he begins to make lots of enemies, people who want to kill him. He begins to get paranoid. Joseph Stalin famously became so paranoid that he had all the doctors killed. When his advisors found him dying on the floor, there were no doctors left to treat him. The authoritarian not only kills his citizens, eventually, when there is nothing left for the beast to eat, it eats him as well. We also read throughout the Bible that it is important to take advice, to learn and grow and change positions when you are given new information. There is a story that claims Marcus Aurelius had a servant follow him around at all hours, occasionally whispering to him, "You are only a man." Quite often, kings have hired court jesters to make fun of them and humble them, lest they become too arrogant and sure of themselves. It is important that a leader listen to counsel, but strongmen leaders, they don't listen to counsel. And if they do, they surround themselves with counsel that tells them what they want to hear, instead of telling them the truth. They do not listen to the will of the people. They spurn democracy and will only hear the concerns of the people insofar as they help them maintain their power. If the people say, "I cannot afford to buy bread for my family," instead of putting systems in place to ensure everyone has bread, the strong man will say, "The enemy is stealing your bread." And quite often, the strongman leader and his advisors will hoard bread for themselves while saying this. I'm not gonna lie, guys. I've had a lot of trouble with gratitude lately, and I imagine I'm not alone in that. It's hard to feel grateful about our blessings in a world that's so hard, especially when you're a marginalized person, and especially when so many people all around you seem to be, well, stupid. And I think the reason it's important to stay humble and keep gratitude in these unfortunate times is that not doing so can lead to a very unproductive thought process. It's a thought we all have at some point or another. If only I was the rich man, If only I was the one in charge. Then this world would be better. Then people would have what they need. People are stupid. They don't know what's best for them. Look at them. They'd rather descend headfirst into fascism than feed a hungry child or live next to an immigrant. Things would be so much better if only I was king. And the reason this is so unproductive is because it holds true to the same belief that has led to the corruption we see today. That our voice is the most important. That the problems in this world can be solved by some chosen one. One man or one woman or one small group of people instead of by the collective. It will take us, all of us, working together, seeing the value in one another. That's what will change the world. It will not be those who think they are bigger or better or smarter or stronger. It will not be those who think their race or gender or sexuality or culture is superior. It will be those of us who can humble ourselves, who can find comfort in standing by people different than us. Those will be the people who change the world. In the right situation, every one of us could be the terrorist. In an alternate reality, any one of us could be the bad guy. Perhaps some of us already were, and through blessings and luck and willpower and the grace of God, we are better than we were before. No man on earth is worthy to be king. And my fellow Christians, we should know this because our only king is supposed to be God. The rest of us are only human. Each of us are sinners in our own right. And I don't say this to make you feel terrible or unworthy or like some chewed piece of gum like other pastors do. I say this to remind you of what Marcus Aurelius' advisor knew. You are only a man. And not only are you only a man, Donald Trump is only a man. Joe Biden is only a man. J.D. Vance is only a man. Kamala Harris is only a man, and they should be treated as such. These are not gods to be worshipped. These are people who have found themselves with an immense amount of power and privilege, and it is not our job to exalt them. It is our job to humble them. It is our job as the people to remind them that their voices, their experiences do not matter more than anyone else's, that they are no better than a sex worker or an immigrant or a queer person, that their lives hold no more value than a Palestinian or a homeless person or a coal miner. Democracy, true, real democracy, is the only thing that can get us out of this. And that means making sure we humble ourselves, that we humble our politicians, and that the information we receive to make our choices is part of a factual, well-informed, and free media. After all, God warned us from the beginning that kings are a bad idea. Maybe it's time we listened. Amen.